40 Eastern, right here on many of these same radio stations. You can also find our broadcast via the Men's College World Series app, the free Varsity Network app, on Alexa-enabled devices, on SiriusXM Channel 84, or online at 1620thezone.com and westwoodonesports.com. Today's game produced by Nick Grimm, studio producer Joey Colbert, network coordinating producer David Adams, on-site coordinating producer Chris Prudon, and the executive producer of the Westwood One NCAA Radio Network is Howard Deneroff. Now for Mike Farron and Gary Sharp, I'm John Bishop. In cooperation with 1620 The Zone, this is the Men's College World Series on the NCAA Radio Network. Congratulations, Florida Gators. We'll talk to you later tonight. So long, everybody.
SiriusXM, like you heard. He had to do an interview.
We have one ticket punched to the championship series, which begins on Saturday. The Florida Gators, fresh off a 3-2 victory over the TCU Horned Frogs, move on, and now they await the winner between Wake Forest and LSU. Hello, everyone. Alongside Nick Handley, I'm Josh Peterson. We are powered by Children's Hospital and Medical Center in Omaha. Nick, what a spectacular finish to that baseball game. For a while, we're like, man, we're going to be on before 4 o'clock. Yeah. And then suddenly, oh, my gosh, it's going to go to extras. We're not going to be on for a whole long time. And then the ninth inning unfolds. What a ridiculous game.
And then the final play. We're like, oh, my gosh, this thing is going to go to extras. Why not? And I don't know what you guys thought about it before you turned it over to the boys up in the booth before the first game. This one, to me, felt like this was going to be all Florida today.
Yeah.
You got Caglione going. TCU's kind of going on fumes.
Yep.
Even though TCU had their guy on the mound, like you just think, all right, it just seems like Florida is going to kind of outmatch him and overwhelm them. Man, give TCU a lot of credit. That was one hell of a battle. And if Florida, I don't think anybody's surprised that Florida's where they are, but the way that game played out, man. So, I mean, what does that mean for tonight? Because I thought, hey, TCU or LSU, Wake Forest could be a close game.
Hey, man, we've had a lot of close games in the Men's College World Series here in 2023, so we hope that the good times roll.
Except for one. The one that I was in the booth for.
Well, thankfully, you're not on the call tonight,
right? No, exactly. Everybody's happy about that one.
Sure. Let's hear, if you missed it, here is how the game finished up. It was so fun being in this building as it unfolds because we're listening live. Like, we have the direct feed from the booth. So we're listening live. So we are as close to reality as you can be. We also have a video stream up. That's a little behind. There are TVs in here. And so the various cheering and reacting, it happened kind of in waves. But here was John Bishop on the call not too long ago as Florida and TCU came down to one final pitch.
One strike away from playing for a national championship. The Florida Gators. Brandon Neely comes set. The 0-2 pitch. He swings. He hits it. Center field. Robertson back at the track, at the wall, crashing into the wall. He makes the catch, and Florida wins. Holy cow. Braden Taylor to the deepest part of the park. Almost tied this game, but Robertson, cold off the bench, slamming into the wall, makes the catch to end the game. Wow.
Incredible. I love the call from John. Does a great job of painting the picture. And so it was so funny here because the ball's in the air, and we know, oh, my gosh, this thing might now go to extra innings. Yep. And so we're just waiting. And look, man, I mean, I'm on the radio all the time. You're on the radio all the time. And yet the majority of the time when I'm taking in sports, I'm watching it the theater of the mind in that moment as I'm just waiting. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? The anticipation is it built and built and built. And then our reaction of, oh! And then a couple seconds later, the same thing here at the Omaha Baseball Village. It was spectacular.
It was a wave of it because of, as you pointed out, the delay. I'm curious, like, okay, so if you're at the Blatt and you're watching the game, you can always hear the crowd reaction.
Always hear
or if you're anywhere in the baseball village, anywhere within earshot.
Yep.
So you knew something happened.
Yes,
like,
you just don't know what.
Was it a great play? Was it the third out? Did we just tie this game up?
Correct.
So you hear that, you're probably, okay, all right, now your eyes are glued on the TV because there's probably like still 20 seconds, 30 seconds behind. And then from various spots, you get like a wave of oohs and ahs, and then you finally figure out what it is. And this is why I love radio, though. Yep. What you just laid out right there, because the way John described it, you knew something big was about to happen. Crash in the wall. Okay, did he catch it?
Yep.
Or did it go over his head?
Exactly.
There's just, and look, we're old school when it comes to what we love to do when it comes to radio, but there's just something about baseball on the radio. Moments like that. There it is. Right.
I think you do a great job, too, of describing what it's like to be around the ballpark. Yesterday, Odson, Happer, and I were moseying our way around Lot D, hanging out at some of the tailgates, and there was cheering in moments, and we were like, that's definitely for this team.
Yep.
It's like when Stanford is playing, like, no offense, the cheers just aren't going to be very loud for Stanford. And so we were able to figure out, hey, this team did well, this team did well. But this game, because it's Florida versus TCU, I don't think there's like a partisan, rooting interest either way. People are just rooting for a good game. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, you don't know. Was that the game-tying run? Was that the game-tying play on defense? And I think that had to be the coolest part, is because then everybody out there in Lot D or wherever they're at, they're probably then turning to their televisions. What's going to happen? And then they still don't know. They still don't know. They still don't know. And then they see it. What a play. What a play by him to go into the wall. I mean, we were talking about it. If he misses it, that we're talking about, at the very least, a triple.
Yeah.
And who knows what else could have happened.
And that's the thing. We got that first inside the park home run by Oral Roberts since 2001. Could we? I mean, think about that. It's been that long. You were this close to maybe having a second one in the College World Series in the same year. And that was their dude. That was TCU's dude, Braden Taylor. So you had, what a game, because it did come down off the bat of TCU's arguably their best hitter throughout the year. He damn near pulls it off, at least tying the game up. And Florida, I think we all thought they should be in that championship series. And who knows? They go in extra innings. Florida still might have pulled that off. But to your point about the fan bases here, too, you could kind of sense that interest in this game was growing and growing and growing. And yes. I really don't think it's not like, other than friends and family from both TCU and Florida, your casual fan, they were getting into that game. And,
yes, they were.
And why wouldn't you? So, again, kudos to Florida, but also TCU of making this thing. I'll go back to it again. A lot more interesting than I thought it would be. Just given TCU losing the very first game of the College World Series here and being able to battle back, and I mean battle back to the very last out by inches.
Incredible. It's definitely one of those games that makes us all pause, as Nick does right now, for a hydration break. In 1620 The Zone, our hydration sponsor is Zen Water. Thirsty for a change. You're enjoying some Zen Water. I got mine in my Yeti.
Delicious.
I see Josh has his. Everyone's drinking delicious Zen Water here. A reminder, by the way, Country Fest is back at OBV this Friday. OBV welcomes singer and songwriter Corey Kent to the Beer Garden stage. Tickets are $20 in advance at mattressfactoryomaha.com or $25 at the door. Speaking of Friday, we knew for sure that was going to be an off day, unless some nastiness happened with the weather. We've been able to avoid that for the most part this week. Now we know part of the picture. At the very least, there will not be two games tomorrow. Yes. We know that for sure. Florida moves on 3-2 with their victory over TCU, and so now they will wait for the winner of Wake Forest and LSU. We'll have you on the air until nice, delicious cake until 5:40 for pregame for that game, and then it'll start after 6 o'clock. So, I mean, Nick, there's a real world. It's crazy to think that we might not be here tomorrow.
Oh,
if
so you
Wake
went,
takes care of
you
business.
went and said it.
I'm a fact-based man. I got to provide the facts. I guess that was more of a theory, though.
I know your reputation with weather, too, and you went there.
That's true.
You decided
to go there.
You
want me to say the snow is done?
I feel okay with that one. I feel okay with that one.
Thank you. The snow is done, friends.
Yeah, I think we're good with that.
We're about to start losing sunlight, though, on a day-after-day basis. I don't know. I'm just trying to depress you.
Oh, yeah, now we're on the other side of it.
I know. Isn't that dumb?
Why do you do that?
How is it that today is the first day of summer, and now we're losing sunlight? I've been saying it for years, and I'm going to say it to you now because we're getting to know each other.
Don't get me on the time zone rampage because I will go on my time zone rampage.
Perfect. I would love to do some time zone ranting with you, but here's my take, Nick. Summer should be June 1st. I don't care about the solstice or any of these things. Hey, how are you? Good. Summer should be June 1st. Spring should be March 1st. Fall should be September 1st, and winter should be December 1st. Boom. Those are my takes. That's my opinion.
There's a simplicity to that. So I'm not against that. I do think so. For me, mentally, the Monday after Memorial Day weekend,
that's summer.
So Memorial Day.
Yeah, sure.
Give me that being day one of summer because
I don't hate that idea at all.
Did you bask in the longest day of the year yesterday?
I thought today is the longest day of the
Bishop
year.
was telling me it was yesterday.
What? See, because some people say it's June 22nd.
Yeah, see, and I thought it was
I thought it's
confused.
Today.
Maybe we're getting some really bad information.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, John, definitely.
John's on fumes right now too.
He is. Look, he does a great job calling the games. I don't need his opinions on sunlight though.
Oh, we got confirmation here. What is that?
It is today, Wednesday.
So today
okay,
is...
perfect. Today's the solstice. All right, so there you go. Today's the longest day of the year.
So when you try to go to bed like me at 9 and it's still as bright as day, and you need like the blackout curtains.
Oh yeah,
this is the day where all that comes in handy.
Do you take like a melatonin to help you out? It's not illegal. That's a legal thing, by the way.
It is.
I just want to make sure people are like, "What, Nick? What pills is he popping?"
Yeah, no, everything's legal in the Handley household. But
just a little help
in the middle of trying to do a little show prep for today. Last night, I got a little nudge on the shoulder from my wife, and I was just sitting up in bed that I'd fallen asleep while looking at the computer.
Oh my god!
I was a little worked yesterday.
Look, you
we went through a really bad game yesterday afternoon.
All the people that are affected by this, we're all affected in our own unique ways at 1620 The Zone during the Men's College World Series. You and Gary, though, are still doing your 6A to 10A show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're troopers, man.
Yeah, you should start doing it from home, too.
I'll be doing it from a hotel on Friday because after tomorrow, it's Chicago bound.
Little
bachelor party going on. So,
awesome.
So yeah, I'll do the yard stream on Friday. But yeah, Gary's got it worse because he's been doing the long days and then still at least leading up and giving plenty of good content from 6A to 10A. But yeah, I don't know. Yes, yesterday got me. Yes, I'm good today.
Yeah,
I'm good today. But yeah, yesterday got me. We were having in-laws over, having a little dinner, and I was probably I tried to be very energetic, and I had very little in the tank. So
that's okay. I think they understand.
I'm thinking of our friends over at the ballpark right now because they've been doing this a lot longer than we have.
And you know what? That's why I'm happy at the end of that call that John was able to say he catches the ball. Because if he would have said it goes over the fence, we might have heard some crashing in there, things being thrown around.
You might have heard it. No.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, wow.
Yeah, exactly. Because for a second, I've been working with John for over a decade now. Yeah. I know the kind of tone that can come with happy John versus angry John. So I was listening very intently because I thought that was going to help us figure out what happened before he, actually made the final call. Wow. Yeah. What a game. Florida wins 3-2 over TCU. They move on to the championship series. And like you said, Nick, that was supposed to be the game. I think a lot of us agreed. Of the two today, this was going to be the one that was more likely to be a blowout or to get away from a team. And look, Florida got up to a great start. It's 2-0 suddenly right away in the top of the first. And it's like, wow, could it be one of those days? Not to mention TCU opportunity after opportunity in the early to middle portion of the game where they're leaving guys on, they're making mistakes. And another time where their coach is doing an interview with ESPN and something bad happens. And for them to fight and to force a ninth inning like they did, props to them, kudos to them. And I mean, it literally went down to the last pitch of the game and they almost did it.
And you're right, because of the way that game ended. Here we are really praising TCU's effort, but I'm sure Sarlos is looking at that game as one that got away with the amount of opportunities early on in this one. And who knows how it would have turned out? Who knows what that would have done to Florida too? But this is what kind of happened with Oral Roberts in their last couple of games against Florida, and then yesterday against TCU. You're getting guys on, then all of a sudden you get some wasted at bats there, and we see that in the College World Series. And I don't even want to say like that's fatigue of playing day after day after day.
Yeah.
You got such good pitching too, but dang, TCU had opportunities. They had a chance to take that lead.
They really did.
And again, I'm not saying Florida wouldn't have responded in kind, but they're probably kicking themselves looking at some of those early opportunities that they were unable to cash in. And we saw that kind of with them yesterday, but then give them credit. They made adjustments at the plate in the latter half of that game yesterday to beat Oral Roberts. And that's a tough pill to swallow. But again, we have no rooting interest when it comes to it. I just think at the end of the day, and if you're a TCU fan, sorry to say, I just think the better team won. And the fact that it was as close as it was, I think was just a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. By the way, Jordan tweets in the meteorological, I can't speak, season start on the 1st of the month, summer, June 1st, et cetera, et cetera. You should know, weatherman. Have I been wrong all these years? I always thought that it was the 21st. That's when things began.
So we're being told anyway.
It's good to know. I liked your take on summer starting on Memorial Day.
Yeah.
We could throw in a
first day the pool's open.
Labor Day.
The pool's open, it's summer to me.
Boom. Couldn't agree with you more.
At least in the Midwest, because I know in other places pools are always open. But here in the Midwest, if you're in Nebraska, the first day the pool is officially open. The first public pool is open. All right, it's summer.
Coming up on the show today, we'll be on with you for about an hour and change. A couple of things kind of caught our eye over the last 24 hours or so, including some of the discourse that has surrounded Nebraska football. I know that you wanted to opine about the bowling story that has made waves around the country. Feel free.
That deserves 2 more shows. I mean, you can't just marinate on that for one show. I mean, that needs varying opinions because wow.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that as we wind down this first segment, and then a bunch of other things as well, including there was an interesting question that we got from a listener quoting On3 about what is the biggest what if in college football history, and listener Brian laid out a scenario that I found fascinating because we always kind of do the whole what happens if Scott Frost chooses Nebraska early, or what happens if Tommy Frazier this and that.
If Frank didn't get fired.
He laid out one that I had not heard of before as kind of patient zero, and then everything else that came from that. So I want to ask you that, and we'll do that next segment as things wind down. But look, I will cede the floor to you, good sir. The bowling story that is taking over the country at this moment in time, and if you missed it as I pull it up, absolutely wild story out of... And I forgot where it was. Stephen F. Austin.
Yep.
Yeah, and the great intrepid reporter. I don't think we said his name this morning, but I want to give this guy praise. Nathan Haug from the Lufkin Daily News, titled "Spare Relationship Causes Awkward Split." Stephen F. Austin, assistant bowling coach, out after affair with athlete.
What a great headline.
Incredible headline. There's a lot to get into, Nick. I mean, where shall we begin?
Well, I think first and foremost, the eye-opening part of the first eye-opening part of the story is the fact that the coach, who is an assistant coach, you think,
an assistant coach.
You would think, that poor wife of his. Well, the wife happens to be the head coach.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Steve Lemke, he was the assistant. He resigned in April 10th. He is married to I think he is still married. It doesn't say. Amber Lemke is the head coach.
Do you think they're going to do some counseling?
So my take. And we'll read some of these quotes in a moment. My take, Nick, was maybe they agreed in the time between April 10th and today, June 21st. The story went live yesterday, June 20th. My take was maybe they agreed, hey, let's give this another go, right? Let's try it again. But then he was quoted numerous times in the story, and it made me wonder what happened when his wife, Amber, saw these quotes and said, I don't know, Steve, if I still want to be with you. After what you said about me.
Yeah, because it's, this was my fault.
Yes.
Is what you're telling me. Your affair with one of our players, our student athletes, this was my fault. Because what is amazing about this story is him sort of doubling down on not only, it's not illegal, it's frowned upon. I like what you guys are talking about, making the comparison to Alan in The Hangover.
Yes.
It's like doing something in a plane. That's,
It's like doing that on an airplane. It's frowned upon. It's not illegal, though.
Thanks a lot, Bin Laden. but this was – so then there was that part of it where he's kind of justifying his actions and saying, look, folks, I may be not the best guy, but I'm not the worst guy.
I didn't break the law.
Yeah, I'm not a criminal.
You can't arrest me for this. Yeah, he says, I knew it was kind of a no-no. But there's not a rule saying it can't happen. There's not a law saying I'm going to jail for doing something like this. There's nothing in stone. We didn't hit on that part this morning, Nick. but there's nothing in stone. Like, they brought down the 10 Commandments.
Well, it's
Thou
kind of a
shalt
gray
not.
area, Josh. It's sort of a gray area.
I guess
it is.
If
you're coaching and you don't necessarily see that right front and center in the coaching ethics manual.
If it's not in the manual, they should maybe add it, though. I guess it's just an ethics code. Like, we frown upon it, but there's no rule. There's no law broken. So immediately you're kind of
NCAA, what he's saying is they're not going to be under probation. The NCAA doesn't actually call this
Mark
like
Emmert's not going to call me.
There's no investigation. This is not an impermissible benefit. This has no NIL implications. Well, maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe we need to dig deeper into that story.
Is this a part of new NIL?
This is it.
In the old days?
Blame new NIL.
Gosh, image, likeness.
It's just ruining college athletics.
For marriages now,
it's now leading to affairs with actual student athletes and coaches, apparently. But,
this was the great part. The affair with the bowler was discovered when Amber Lemke saw a text message from her on Steve Lemke's phone, he said. Okay, so again, we're off to a bad start. He says, hey, I didn't break a law. I mean, I guess it's hard to argue.
Yep.
Quote from Steve Lemke. It didn't have anything in detail. It was just about how amazing I am, basically, in the general perspective. Amber saw that and questioned me, and I got to the point where it just built up so much, and I basically told her the truth after she dug through my phone. So again, this part is classic because he's like, yeah, the player's complimenting.
I love that. I mean, this guy, if he would only just show a little bit more confidence in his everyday existence.
Yeah.
So clearly, it's just how amazing I am. And just a lot of compliments. And apparently my wife found that to be suspicious, that I was getting complimented up and down. I guess maybe that says more about him. Mm-hmm. And then digging deeper where it sounded like he just got annoyed that there was this interrogation going on. It's like, you know what?
I'll just tell you.
Screw it. I'm going to tell you what happened. Here's what happened.
Yep.
Now give me my phone back. So I can text her again.
Yeah, and he continues to speak, thankfully, to the great reporter here for the Lufkin Daily News. He finishes by saying, I was the stay-at-home dad for 5 years with the kids while Amber got to go off and coach the team. Yep. And when she'd get back, I'd run practices on top of taking care of the kids while she was back. When they travel again, I would sit back and take care of the kids. That's when I got hired on. She almost forced me to run practices. I was a volunteer the entire time before that, trying to help out Amber. Once I got hired on, one thing stemmed from another. I felt like I was doing too much for what I was being valued at. Amazing. Chef's kiss to everything about this. Everything about this. She was going away, so I had to coach.
Yeah.
I was doing all these things. I had to take care of the kids.
I'm the victim here.
Oh, my God.
I'm the victim.
Nick, what did you expect him to do?
Shut up.
What did you expect him to do? Yeah, home with the baby.
I know.
Man.
What am I supposed to do? You're on the road all the time. I got lonely.
Honey, come home. Isn't that crazy? She was on the road with the team.
Exactly.
Presumably the player.
Exactly. So the player was gone too. So I'm not trying to justify, like if it was somebody else that lived near you, but she was on the road too.
Yeah.
But
I'm not trying to put down the sport of bowling because I know it is more intense than people believe.
Sure.
But
what do you suppose the practice
schedule Josh,
like and the travel schedule?
There was meticulous planning on those practices.
Oh, yeah.
We all know how difficult and the percentages, how low they are of the 7-10 split. You're trying
it's brutal.
I mean, you got to set up some
situational
analytics.
Situational, yes. It's like doing the 2-minute drill at the end of football practice.
Yeah, what does the TrackMan look like analytics-wise when it comes to the bowling and what you have to set up every day? I mean, that stresses a person. That just stresses, and it leads you astray. Sometimes you just make bad decisions when you are overly stressed being a stay-at-home dad and having to orchestrate bowling practices.
Do you think that, how like at the end of practice, Bill Belichick will do those weird scenarios? Do you think they do that with the 7-10 split? Like, all right, it's time to finish practice, team.
Yeah.
Let's get the 7-10 split going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then they do the thing. Did you ever see the Disney Channel original movie Alley Cat Strike where they push? Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. They do the thing and they push it down and they win. Boom. Spoiler alert.
So what you're saying is it's kind of like the end of practice. It's like the 2-minute drill, or it's like your goal line. You're going to go over your goal line situations.
Yes, absolutely.
7-10 split practice. And look, and this is a good bowling program, so the stress of it as well. There's a
national championship,
there.
Nick. Yeah. National championship winning bowling program in Division I, as everybody knows, and everybody did know earlier today. Nobody thought that they were at a lower level.
Stress can be a B, and look, it led to some bad decision making. But what's just amazing about this story is he wouldn't shut up.
I still can't believe it. I still wonder what this reporter was thinking. How many attaboys has Nathan Haug gotten from his bosses and editors over the last 24 hours? Because again, This is the number one story on this website. Their traffic, I mean, props to them for keeping this story like alive, because I figured at some point the traffic would overload because it has to be the most popular story that the website has ever had. I hope that he got a nice bonus from it. And also, huge props again to the headline maker for this story. Yeah. Spare relationship causes awkward split. Perfection. Perfection.
Is there an influx in Lufkin Hotel movement right now? Because now everybody wants to get a quote out of this guy. Because here's the other question I have for the reporter. How many questions did he really have to ask? Because I feel like he was volunteering information where it's like, all right, I'm good. Do you have anything to add? And he's like, yeah, you know what? I want to talk about my role as a husband.
Yeah, my wife kept going on coaching visits. Yeah, I would like to know, did it start with like, hey, do you want to give your side of the story? Or I bet it started with, do you have a quote or do you have a statement on this? And he was like, yes, I do.
Oh,
like,
do I?
Can I, just a sec. I thought you were going to say no comment. Let me grab my pen and paper, please. Thank you very much. Incredible.
You can't make this up.
Absolutely incredible. Speaking of incredible, we had a great ball game earlier today. Florida 3, TCU 2. Florida on to the championship series. They await the winner of tonight's game between Wake Forest and LSU. Pre-game for that under an hour away. All right, when we return, Nick, the what-if question that I saw that listener Brian sent our way that is really good, and I look forward to your thoughts on that. Some other odds and ends as well as we move on into the 5 o'clock hour. Josh Peterson, Nick Handley with you. We got Dan Campanen back in our zone studio. Josh Hudson hanging out with us. You can come and hang out with us here at the Omaha Baseball Village. We wrap up the hour when we return here on 1620 The Zone.
There needs to be like a E60.
Josh Peterson, Nick Handley with you here inside of the zone booth at the bullpen inside of the Omaha Baseball Village. And you can visit that spot right now and register to win a summer prize pack of a grill, Kansas City Royals tickets, and ice cream from Ted and Wally's and Rib Shack Barbecue for a year. 13th and Mike Fahey. We are powered by Access Bank, here for a reason. Yours. Nick, we're getting many tweets about the bowling situation.
Yeah, Joel. Good for you, Joel. That was you made a 44-year-old man blush.
Yeah, I don't, normally being in studio, I'd feel very comfortable reading these things on the air. At a public place, there are children around. Jordan, Shangping, just know that I've seen your tweets. I've seen the tweets. They're very funny, and I've liked some of them. So, going from there. Speaking of seeing the tweets, Nick, so there was a question on 3 Post this yesterday. What is the biggest what if in college football history? And the photo that they attach is Joe Burrow wearing an Ohio State uniform, not a Nebraska uniform. So they didn't even that would have been funny if they would have been like him in a Nebraska uniform and made everybody around
Just
here
because.
mad. Yeah. But Brian asked a question that I had never really considered. Scott doesn't come back from Stanford. Does NU win in 97? Does T.O. retire still or hold out longer and get to 2001? Does Frank then take over and get a longer shot? Would assume we don't go so hard for Scott to coach then if he's coaching. You want to talk about a butterfly effect.
There is a chain reaction there.
Yeah, so he stays at Stanford. I mean, the immediate question is, what does this mean for 96 and 97? Hell, let me throw this at you real fast.
Okay.
What does it mean for 95, given his involvement with Lawrence Phillips?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, very quickly, a butterfly flaps its wings and,
Well, in 95, even with the suspension of Lawrence Phillips,
which Frost was involved in.
Yep,
they did.
They rolled.
They did.
But maybe more importantly, what would the relationship been like with Scott and some of the players from that team? I don't know. If he wasn't there, obviously they might think different of him if he ever sort of like resurfaced. Like, let's say he was never a Nebraska guy, but he was the most highly sought after coach. Just take the Nebraska part away from it, but then his coaching path was the same. If he's the most highly sought after coach and he was a Nebraska homegrown guy, he just never played at Nebraska. He finished his career at Stanford. Would that have had appeal? And I think there's a lot of reason to believe that he would have been a candidate regardless because of his trajectory just in a short time as a head coach. But the quarterback play between 96 and 97, because you would have had, Frankie London?
Frankie London was there. Matt Turman was still there in 96. Eric Crouch redshirted in 1997. He was on the roster, a Miller North grad.
Newcomb was around.
Bobby Newcomb was also around in 97. Of course, he was playing wide receiver throughout that season.
That would have been one hell of a quarterback battle, first and foremost. But, so let's say that the quarterback position is sort of in flux, which was a big part of that 97 run. I mean, we will always remember the flea kicker.
For sure.
So do you even get that opportunity? And, the quarterback position, Scott played very well in that game.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that efforts and those abilities and you lose that game, clearly you're not playing for a national championship. The T.O. question.
See, that's
really good.
I think so too, because I guess the theory that I've always proffered is that if 97, let's say they lose to Missouri, and so it's pretty obvious going into the bowl game that they're not going to win a national championship. I've always wondered if he does retire, because if you remember, famously the year before, 96 was supposed to be his last season. He had promised that to Frank Solich, and they go 11-2, and he asks basically can I come back another year? Which is crazy to think. Tom Osborne asked Frank Solich, hey, do you mind if I roll this back one more time? Because he knew Grant Wistrom, Jason Peter, etc. A loaded team was going to come back in 1997. At a certain point, does he keep pushing it off? And at that point, Frank Solich probably moves on, because Frank Solich was close to taking, I know the Minnesota job was one of them in the mid to late 90s. And I think there was another one in there as well where he had interviewed for it. And so, you think at that moment in time, he probably, if Tom is willing to come back again and he says, sorry, I can't go out on a sour note, Frank probably does move forward. And so I don't even know if he gets a longer leash, because I don't even know if he's at Nebraska.
Well, and that is a question that only Tom Osborne could answer, because think about some of, and two, coaches as far as what they accomplished on the field and are no longer with us too, that probably held on too long for their position. And that was Bobby Bowden and Joe Paterno. are you starting to chase titles where you feel like I'm looking for that key moment where I've got a wagon of a team. This team is destined to at least be in the national championship game, and if not favored to win. So I'm circling this year, and injuries and things can happen, but this is kind of the year. I always felt like Bobby Bowden probably held on too long. Now, again, he was sort of the figurehead for a while.
Yes, he was.
Because Jimbo Fisher, everybody knew he was the heir apparent, and he was kind of handling the day-to-day. Bobby Bowden was just the sort of the face of the program. That was about it. Joe Paterno, depending on who you listen to, and there's been, many of stories written since he passed away in that whole Sandusky scandal, there was more than a couple of occasions where they said, all right, Joe, we think this would be a good year to transition out. And he challenged him. He said, you know what? I'm not ready. Go ahead and try, but you're going to lose.
Yeah.
I don't think T.O. would be like that where, hey, no, I'm not ready because I haven't accomplished what I want, or I'm not in that – I'm not sort of coming up on that season where I feel like this is going to be the perfect, ideal time for me to step away where I'm going to have this great season, a possible national championship, where you start to just chase and chase and chase, and before you know it, the game's kind of getting away from you. You've got some staffers that would make – really good decisions if they were in that position. And all the as you mentioned, like Frank Solich at the time and some other guys that would have been on that staff are starting to wonder, I can't wait forever. I got to start looking out for professional me. I wonder if there would have been something like that. I don't think Osborne would have held on too long and tried to chase something that was just never going to happen. But it's at least an interesting question, given the fact that, that there are a lot of recruits or people in position that could have maybe altered that timeline. And I think it's a great question about Scott.
Well, not to mention, too, Nick, with T.O., like, it was obvious that he had other interests. We saw those interests with him in getting into politics after his time at Nebraska. But I'm with you. He never seemed like the guy that was going to hang on too long, because we literally saw him retire in the midst of the greatest stretch of football that, like, anybody had ever had, going 60-3, winning 3 titles in 4 years, and being a whisker away from another one against Florida State and a couple of bounces maybe going their way in 1996. I mean, it was a bonkers 5-year stretch of football for the program, and he walked away from it.
I'd like to think, regardless of quarterback, I'd like to think he knew that 97 team was so loaded that going into it, even if they had a quarterback that was, dare I say, a game manager or a guy who could just run the option, maybe not at the same level as Scott Frost with his size, I still would like to think that he had confidence in that team that regardless of what happens, we're going to get enough wins that I can be satisfied to walk away.
Josh Peterson, Nick Handley with you. More to come when we return next hour on 1620 The Zone.
Green boy, thank you. We love them, don't we, folks? Show them sponsors a little extra love. Like the strong winds of the farm, he gets a play on this opportunity. Looking forward to the years in the future. He builds everything from the heart.
The 12-year-old quarterback, we should put him on, see if he can just give us an inning to play by play.
Oh, I like that.
It's kind of cool.
And I thought I was getting like valuable experience in high school, and meanwhile now kids are recording podcasts when they're 12. Oh, apparently we got a text from Anthony Robinson. He goes, I'm over here with an earshot of you guys. People keep saying they're recording a live podcast. Folks, it's still AM radio. That's true, Dan.
That's right. Hey, Dan, how's the upstairs today? It does. Can't really do much editing to this. I guess you can pop it up. You got us in the stream.
Do you want me to make your voice sound any different?
Yeah, could you give me a little Brian Kelly? I don't want Notre Dame Brian Kelly. I want LSU Brian Kelly. Yeah, can we do like a little bit more of a Southern dub?
Omaha, House of Bluffs. Sponsored by Omaha Wrestling, 197 in Center. Also, real quick, gentlemen, for the record, yes, two more birthdays. Omaha.
Thank you.
Village, powered by Children's Hospital and Medical Center in Omaha. And Access Center, here for a reason. Yours on 1620 The Zone.
Josh Peterson, Nick Handley, here on 1620 Zone. Some live radio for you on
Wednesday afternoon. We love the AM band. We love the extended AM band.
We love being on radio.
Do you ever say, and I know you've done when left to right, you ready to
I did that in college once, but that's the last time I
called a football game.
Across the radio dial. No. Somebody told me, like, don't do that. Yeah, sound like a kid. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not going to. You got it. I respect it. More of a rapping voice. Sounded like you. Bourbon and smoke. Do you like bourbon? Never smoked this before.
Yeah.
You can come by the Zone booth inside the Omaha baseball booth for a year from 10-1. 10-1
Ice cream,
1620 The Zone, celebrating more than 35 years of over 3,000 flavors in Omaha. Like I said, this is 1620 The Zone. It is still AM radio. 4-3 TCU 2. That game ended about an hour ago, maybe a little bit longer. An incredible game goes down to the wire. Florida gets the victory, and now we know that the winner of tonight's game or potentially tomorrow's game between LSU and Wake Forest will meet them on Saturday night.
They will, and if you were wondering, because
we were, yes.
There is one game tomorrow that would be a 6 p.m. game, even with the NBA draft going on with ESPN. They would move over to ESPN.
We know they don't produce anymore. They should.
Deuce?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did we get new information? I thought Josh was breaking.
Is it 2? Is it 2? No, it's 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock
Tomorrow.
Yeah, so now we're all kind of
I was saying this
to somebody earlier, just depending on what happened there, we know a lot of tomorrow or very little about tomorrow.
I guess we do know now at the very least. I won't be on until 2 o'clock tomorrow, which is like a first for me now over the last week. So Mike Schaefer and I will be doing a show together. Now we await to find out if we will be doing it from here until 5:40 ahead of a baseball game, or if we'll be back in the friendly confines of NRG Media at 50th and Dodge in air conditioning until 6 o'clock.
You tell me there wouldn't be any foot traffic if there's no games going on? I mean, the place doesn't shut down tomorrow.
No, it doesn't. That's true.
Yeah.
I guess we could come here. We agreed, though. We just said, let's go back there.
It might be kind of boring.
Yeah, it might be.
Just sitting out here hoping that someone walks by and gives us free stuff, and they wouldn't be doing that.
Man, I love free stuff. You know what will not be boring, though? Country Fest.
Oh.
It's back at the OBV on Friday.
Yeah, you said something right there.
OBV welcomes singer and songwriter Corey Kent to the Beer Garden stage. Tickets are $20 in advance at mattressfactoryomaha.com or $25 at the door. The countdown continues. At 5:40, we will send you up to the broadcast booth. John Bishop, Mike Farron, Gary Sharp on the field for Wake Forest versus LSU. We saw this matchup, Nick, 2 days ago. Wake Forest won that one 3-2 in what was one of many games that have been decided by 3 runs or fewer. That was another one of the 1-run games. Only yesterday was the bad day here at the College World Series. 6-1 TCU over Oral Roberts, LSU 5-0 over Tennessee. Otherwise, this has been one of the best College World Series that I can remember.
Yep.
Close games, interesting moments. Otson was telling us off the air that the last out hit by TCU versus Florida. How many ballparks, Josh?
Oh gosh,
Josh is gone.
This is cruel.
It would have been a home run it was 20 some odd ballparks, if I remember.
I thought you said 97% of
97%
college ballparks.
We're oh my gosh. So that and like the wind helped push that ball back in as well, and that is why we know that Florida will make it to the championship series. Why do you think we've had such a great College World Series? Why do you think we've had so many games go down to the wire? Is it evenly matched? Is it just the kind of year? I mean, we're still in like the COVID era in terms of eligibility. I wonder if that's playing a part.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think college baseball right now, you've got older rosters. You've got guys that have developed. I mean, one of the guys that, dare I say, could potentially factor into tonight, but if LSU would win, more than likely factors into tomorrow, Paul Skeens. You've got guys. This is where the transfer portal is playing an impact too, because Skeens is a great example of a guy who was a two-way player, but knowing that he's going to make the most money by being a pitcher. So you're going to stick around for another year. You're going to develop. You're going to really kind of hone in on your craft. You see a lot of different examples of having an older roster, having some super seniors that want to stick around, and then of course the MLB draft as that shrunk. There's more incentive to stick around. So I think that has a lot to do with it, but. We knew going in, when you saw the super regional matchups and then you saw everybody emerge, that this was such a balanced field. Even going all the way down to the 4-seed Oral Roberts, anybody who'd paid attention to Oral Roberts realized that this is a team that could really make some teams, the other 7, really uncomfortable. So the overall talent, and if you look at those rosters, LSU maybe a little bit more youth, but you've got a lot of old rosters. And so these are guys that are familiar with each other. And it's no wonder when you look at the conferences that are represented too, just the absolute grueling, just slugfest that is the SEC, the ACC, Big 12. Oral Roberts may be a little exception to that, but as I mentioned, just a great baseball program, and they've been winning for years. I think there's a lot of that, but I was still skeptical, Josh, because I think a lot of us were, okay, this should be on paper a really good College World Series given how talented they are, but it has finally played out that way where we really haven't seen anything kind of go sideways, where a team's identity coming in, whether they're a good pitching staff or a well-rounded team where they do pitching and offense pretty well, or a team that's mashing the ball. We haven't really seen teams get completely out of their identity. But what's also kind of interesting to watch is when teams have maybe not in a certain game played up to their identity, they've sort of made up for it on the other end, whether it's pitching or what you've seen in the batter's box. And this thing has had it all too. We've got great pitching performances.
Man, we have.
And with lower scores, we've still seen the ball flying out. Maybe not necessarily the last couple of days with the win, but those first couple of days, the ball had no problems getting out of the ballpark. So it's had a little bit of everything, but I would chalk it back to a lot of veteran lineups. COVID's still a thing, but the transfer portal also a big deal. And when you look at that MLB draft, we saw that in 2020. As it starts to expand a little bit, maybe it's not as big of a factor, but it's still a major influence in NIL because there's still, especially in the SEC, there is incentive to stick around. I mean, think about that. If you're, say, a round 12, a round 13 guy, and you're looking at what your potential signing bonus is, and it's not what you would like if you're looking at whatever your draft slot is, and then you've got a coach saying, hey, you got to do what's good for professional you, but we got some incentive financially that we can hook you up with a great NIL package. And you're thinking, I could play one more year, try to up my draft stock, and while doing so, I'm not going to be poor.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of that gives a lot of these
loaded
baseball
rosters.
Players a reason to stay.
Yeah,
absolutely,
for sure. And I think you hit on something too. We have had some low scoring games. You just kind of look back at what we've seen. The 2 highest scoring games of the whole series took place on day 1. Oral Roberts 6, TCU 5, Florida 6, Virginia 5. But otherwise, there has still been moments. I mean, I'd say that the last pitch of the entire game today is a great example. It was exciting. The ball was in the air. We didn't know if it was going to go over the fence. We didn't know if it was going to get pushed back in. We didn't know if the outfielder was going to run into the wall and the ball was going to bounce and roll around. We've had those moments where I still remember, man, a little over a decade ago, sitting in this ballpark and watching these games where you'd see teams get up 2-0, 3-0, 4-0. And it was like, all right, see you later. Can we fast forward because we know this game is over? This one has had crazy swings. And we haven't been able to get that every year, and that's made it a lot of fun, too.
You've seen comebacks, and here's the other thing, and I might be off by a run, but as far as I can think of in this series, the biggest sort of crooked number we've seen in an inning has been 3 runs, which is also crazy to think because there's a lot of College World Series that we've seen in the past where you get maybe that 5 or 6 spot, and all of a sudden the route is on. Teams have done a good job, even when they've given up a couple of runs, and you've put up a crooked number of limiting that damage too. So if you're looking at the most lopsided inning in this College World Series being a 3 spot, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it says a lot.
It says a lot about the team's ability to, again, sort of tamp down what could be a disastrous inning and still keeping your team, especially in the aluminum bat era, even though it's BB core, guys are adjusting. You're able to limit those types of innings down to 3. You still got to punch your shot.
TCU did not hit a home run at the end of that game, but you can hit a home run with down-home Southern-style barbecue from the Rib Shack Smokehouse, 108th and Q, and ribshacksmokehouse.com. You noticed something as the camp countdown season begins, indispensable Huskers to know. You noticed something with one of Nebraska's quarterbacks today. We will talk about that when we return. We are a half hour away from sending you up into the booth for this one tonight between Wake Forest and LSU. Will these two teams play again tomorrow? Well, if so, LSU will need to get a victory. They'll be the home team tonight, by the way, so they'll be batting in the bottom of the innings. Josh Peterson, Nick Handley with you. More to come as we continue the countdown to that game next on 1620 The Zone. Josh Peterson, Nick Handley with you as we await the start under an hour now away for Wake Forest and LSU. Looking forward to that one. Of course, you can hear this game and all of our games and coverage here on 1620 The Zone. Florida wins 3-2 earlier today. They move on to the championship series, which will begin on Saturday. All right, Nick, we were talking earlier before the show, and one of the things that happens now as we reach late June, early July, we're going to start seeing the lists. Most indispensable Husker, most important Husker. Maybe we should put all of our brains together next year and do the same thing for Nebraska here at the Zone. We could give it a fun name.
Yeah. Or just go completely off the
funnest
the
names to
island
say. Top 50 names on Nebraska's team.
Let's just shake it up a little bit.
Perfect. So the World Herald and Journal Star, HuskerExtra.com, they're combining forces this year to put together their list. And the way that they are phrasing it is 50 Nebraska football players you need to know heading into the season. And today was number 49, and it was Luke Mullen who had the duties to write about number 49, Chubba Purdy. And I know that caught your eye. What was the thing that stood out to you when you saw Chubba Purdy come in at number 49?
I think it just really hits home the reality of this Nebraska football roster, and that is the amount of inexperience in some key areas.
Yes.
Because if you're looking at your 50 best players, and you've got Chubba Purdy in there, and this is nothing against Chubba, because you're obviously having to weigh in a bunch of factors, and one of those would be game plan experience. And then I would also think that you're still looking at potential ceiling based on what you've seen. Chubba, to me, and I think I text you this one, is, to me, the most stuck in the mud type of player as far as his role this year. And the reason I would say that, and again, this is no disrespect to his potential ability, but this is a guy, if you go back and kind of read the tea leaves and just the overall narrative of the spring, who was, outside of Jeff Sims, who was the most talked about quarterback in the spring?
Heinrich Haarberg.
100%.
Yeah, not even close.
And we all watched the spring game. I know there were 14 other practices that the coaches saw and evaluated. Heinrich looked like he was still a bit green.
Yes.
There were still some things that Heinrich needed to shore up as well. But we already saw Chubba a year ago, and now there are factors, I understand, of the type of offense that he was in. Even though Mark Whipple sort of handpicked him because he recruited him previously when he was at Pitt, it just never seemed like the complete package, or never seemed like he was ever fully confident. He would give you some bursts throughout some games. You're like, okay, he's starting to figure this out. It's starting to slow down for him. But then he would kind of resort back to some bad habits. If I were to take what we learned in the spring on what was said about the quarterbacks, again, you could look at a lot of the highlights that they were sending out to the public.
A lot of Heinrich Haarberg in the highlights.
Exactly. And then you started to see some Jeff Sims, but I think they were always, we're not worried about Jeff Sims.
Yeah, they were confident in him,
And then I'd even throw in the, what if Casey decided to stay?
Yep, for sure.
Where would Chubba go? So for Chubba being 49, I'm not saying I disagree with him being in the top 50, but this is a guy that we don't even know if he's going to be the backup quarterback. And you're considering him part of the top 50 quarterbacks. But the reality is, this is kind of where this roster is when it comes to experience with this particular football team and really Power 5 experience.
I think that's the scary part is I'm guessing you and I would agree that the 1, 2, 3 right now would be Jeff Sims, then Haarberg, and then Chubba. Okay, so if our hypothesis is true, and for the record, I think that is true. Like, they can tell us they're not putting out depth charts, but I think that would be the depth chart right now. All right, so we're all in agreement on that. I'm guessing 99% of our audience would agree. Wow, does it say something about the talent of the roster that the third-string quarterback that we collectively agree on is in here as a top 50 Husker that you need to know? And some people might say, Josh, Nick, what does that mean? You need to know. Well, for me, Nick, it says it's someone that might have to play this year or not even have to, because other positions, backup linebacker is going to be in the top 50. They're going to be, an important part of the roster. That, I would say, would be really scary. Really scary. We have Jack Mitchell on our show every Monday, and he has been, ever since Casey Thompson, he left and that became official, man, he gets nervous. He does not like the idea of the quarterback depth coming back to haunt this team again, because it really showed itself last year. I mean, that was a 4-8 team. They were a bad football team. They gave some games away early when Frost was still the head coach, but late in the season, when the depth of that position was strained. I don't know if I can say for sure that it lost them the Illinois game or lost them the Wisconsin game or whatever, Michigan, but it definitely did not help. And we saw the value of the starting quarterback in Casey Thompson. We'll see if Sims brings a similar value. But I'm with you because for the record, I hadn't seen this story yet until you messaged me about it. Like, hey, I want to talk about this. And I was like, wow, Chuba in the top 50.
It jumps off the page.
It does. It really does.
Well, and when they recruited him, and when we were, I don't know how you reacted, but when they got Casey Thompson, then all of a sudden you get Chuba Purdy, I'm like, okay, you've got your stopgap and you've got your future quarterback.
Because he has 4 years of eligibility.
100%. And you're thinking, all right, this guy if he is being sought after by Mark Whipple, we're thinking, well, could he develop him like Pickett? Is this the next project? And the skill set that we were told, and I say we were told, and I'm not saying he never developed or never had these going for him, but what we were told is this guy can chuck it. He's pretty accurate, and he's got a little athleticism. So he can move and create a little extra time, find some separation, get the ball out there. And this is a guy that Nebraska can really kind of mold here in years to come.
And by the way, he has that athleticism. He's like one of the fastest guys on the team.
Yes.
So he has that.
And we saw that, but it was erratic.
Yes.
Last year, he was running without purpose.
Yep.
I mean, maybe the purpose was to avoid a sack, but it wasn't like he was looking downfield. The accuracy was never there. And I know sometimes that can take some time, especially if you're learning a new system, but I don't want to put all of his sins from a year ago on the field and just say that's who he's going to be. But if this is a guy that we need to know as a top 50 Husker player, again, kind of going back to what you said, that does not paint a pretty picture for the depth of this position. And then I would also throw in Heinrich Harburg, what we saw in the spring compared to what was being talked about. And I'll reemphasize, one practice/scrimmage compared to 14 others that we didn't see. I don't know about you. I didn't see a lot from Heinrich where I'm like, I can totally see what the coaches have been talking about. It just, what his skill set was sort of talked about when he first got to Nebraska, Chuba, that is, we just have not seen it. And we did not see it in the action that he did have. And I think it was a bigger sample size than most would even want to admit.
Yeah, and Nick, I think the problem too with Harburg at this moment in time is we have only seen him in a few instances, right? We saw him in the spring game, and that was what it was. Last year, I think, or 2 years ago, remember they had that open practice in April of 2021. And he was a player that I think we were all pretty curious about. He actually didn't look too bad in that practice. Logan Smothers was the quarterback that struggled there, but he didn't look very good in the spring game. And he's had these very few moments now where he's been able to be in front of media and or fans, just because he hasn't come in a real football game just yet. Hasn't always performed at the level that I think that you would hope him to. And I bet the coaches were really hoping for that, right? All right, he's having a good spring. They really like his tools. Obviously, every coaching staff seemingly likes his tools. You want to see what happens when you're out there in front of thousands of people. I think, there's a lot that you can take and leave with the spring game. But I do think that one thing coaches can learn is how do the guys respond when the lights are on and we go through the tunnel walk and we do all these things. And so for him to perform the way he did, I do think that had to maybe take some of the wind out of their sails going into the rest of the offseason.
I think it did too, because I don't know what everybody was expecting, but I was kind of expecting to see sort of a little bit more refined, polished Heinrich Harburg. And I don't want to just completely dwell on that one performance on that one Saturday afternoon at Memorial Stadium, but maybe my expectations and other people's expectations were a little too high, but you were hearing some camp chatter during spring too of he looks different. He looks like he's really comfortable in this offense. And maybe that is the case. Ultimately, maybe that is the case.
Yeah.
But then it was weird after spring, and we did see a decent amount of Chuba in the spring game as well. You started kind of hearing a little bit of the conversation about Chuba. You brought up how he's the fastest guy, and with all of the workouts going on, this is a guy that has really kind of shown out. And then you kind of wonder, okay, what does that mean for the quarterback room right now? And maybe more importantly, what are they going to value out of the quarterback compared to what the previous staff did? And we know the difference there because of Jeff Sims. I mean, Jeff Sims is a big-bodied guy. He can throw it. The accuracy maybe isn't his biggest strong suit, but what is just his overall size and ability to, really kind of be a bruising runner. Okay, that's great. But as we know, when you're exposing your body, you might have to dip into the bullpen every now and then.
Sure.
Are they going to value a guy? And this is where I kind of look at Chuba. If it's maybe a situation where you need a guy to have Hey, this guy works out over here. You need somebody to come in for just a short stint. Are you more trusting of Chuba because he's already been in game-type situations and it's not going to be overwhelming? And then if you have to have more of a long-term solution when it comes to the quarterback, is that where you maybe go ahead and unleash Heinrich? And so I think there could be different roles where I know we've heard this before. You might have 2A and 2B when it comes to the backup quarterback. But for Chubb to kind of factor into a top 50 list, I go back to the original point. It's just very telling of the lack of experience that you have.
Yeah, and putting a bow on this conversation, it does make me wonder, like, what other names might surprise us as this list continues to get closer and closer to number one. Like, I think we all know who number one's going to be. It's going to be Jeff Sims. Yep. You know, on any list of most important, best, indispensable, yada, yada, yada. Jeff Sims will be number one.
Yeah.
You know, after that, I mean, I was just trying to think of who would I put as the number two most important Husker, most indispensable Husker. You know, at what point does a kicker show up? You know,
and it should.
Alvano, you know,
Alvano without knowing him, but you know, you think of, you know, like a Buschini and guys that have
Isn't
been
that
around.
crazy? They'll be in the top 50 somewhere,
and they have to be.
Yeah.
And this is, and we were talking about this morning. This is where I think, as fans for Nebraska, you've got to understand the reality of this roster first and foremost, because there's this idea that if, you know, Nebraska were to get off to a slow start, like, how would we react? And so I think if you understand that this thing just needs to have that look almost, and I don't want to go back to 2018 and bring up any I don't want to bring up any Scott Frost memories, but remember the trajectory at the end of the first year where they won
4-2. Yep.
They won 4 out of 6 games, and you're thinking, all right, cool. I'm okay with this. You're starting to see a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel. These guys are starting to get it. I think now, knowing what we know, but also knowing Matt Rule's history, I think you'd be elated to see Nebraska be able to finish off a season that way, whether that constitutes a 6 wins, 5, 7, whatever it is. Understanding where this roster is right now, there's a lot of examples of, wow,
yeah,
okay. I need to be mindful of this entire situation. I'm not trying to paint this completely dark picture of, get ready for another 2 or 3 win season, you know, Rule and his previous stops too. That's what's going to happen. But this is where we got to sort of pump the brakes a little bit on the Nebraska just coming out of the gates with their hair on fire and getting off to a 2-0 start.
Yeah.
Hey, we would all take it. It'd be great. And if that did somehow happen, I think you would absolutely have to chalk that up to culture, because I don't think you can look at it and say, oh, yeah, this team is ready to win now right out of the gate based on what we know of this roster.
Yeah, going to be tough. Really going to be tough. What is not going to be tough, though? Watching some baseball tonight. We will come back. We will wrap up our show. Wake Forest versus LSU. Little over a half hour away. The winner of this one, either tonight or tomorrow, will meet Florida in the championship series, which begins on Saturday. Josh Peterson, Nick Handley, Josh Otson with you. We say goodbye and give you our picks for the game when we return here on 1620 The Zone. Alongside Nick Handley and Josh Hodson, I'm Josh Peterson. We have Dan Campion doing great work back in our 1620 The Zone studios. We appreciate you for joining us on this Wednesday here, day 6 at the Men's College World Series. If you missed it earlier, Florida 3, TCU 2. That game for a moment, Mr. Handley, we thought, all right, Florida's going to win 2-1. And then we thought, oh, we're going to have extras, 2-2. And then Florida takes the lead, and we thought we might have extras again. But a potential home run was robbed, and Florida moves on to the championship series, and now they await the winner. They're hoping this thing goes to tomorrow, man. They're hoping this thing goes to tomorrow.
Yeah, where's everybody going? The baseball village is starting to empty out a little bit. Where are they going? Is there something going on tonight? Is there a rematch of some sorts?
This one should be good.
I think
one
so.
Should be good.
Well, and the name to know, because hearing sort of the buzz around Charles Schwab Field, and even this morning we were talking to some of our guests that are covering this event as well, that have a little bit more inside knowledge. We assume that if LSU wins tonight, Skeens would get the ball tomorrow. He'd be on basically major league rest.
Yep, I was just about to ask you about him.
But not once, but twice, I heard references of, if not tomorrow, maybe tonight. Not obviously starting, but he could even have a role tonight. Because obviously you got to get to tomorrow.
You
and
have
if you're
to.
in a situation,
It's like saving a timeout at the end of a game.
Absolutely.
The game's over.
And so could Paul Skeens have some type of role even in tonight's game, which would just be wild?
I asked Happer that question. We talked about it a little bit earlier. What's the scenario that we see him tonight? And he said we see him because they're down and they're trying to stop the bleeding. You think that that's what we would see?
I think so, because this is where you understand, okay, what do we have available? And remember, this is an LSU pitching staff that, they've gotten some pretty dang good efforts with Nasty Nate last night and, really Floyd before it went sideways for him. But this is a group that was banged up in the season. I mean, they lost 2 key arms in the season, so they'd be a lot better off in the situation than they currently are. So your options are limited right now. And so if that is your best opportunity to sort of stop the bleeding and keep this team within striking distance, you got to do it. Because, again, like LSU, like TCU had to do yesterday, like all these teams, you get to that next day, you get back to the hotel, you start looking at matchups, and you start piecing it together. But you got to get there. And if Skeens is your best option and you're starting to see this thing maybe get away from you, and you're looking in that bullpen and you're looking at the available arms that are going to be as effective as they can be to keep things within reach, you got to go with them.
So earlier today, coming into the game or between Florida and TCU, rather, I liked Florida, and I liked them fairly comfortably, right?
Yep, I did
and
too.
I also liked coming into today, I liked Wake. So I liked essentially us knowing, like, all right, cool, we'll see you on Saturday. Florida did not win comfortably. That went down to the wire. It has me now a little weary of picking Wake again, but I'm going to do it. Where were you coming into the day, and where are you at now?
I'll stick with what I said this morning, and maybe it's just because I'm a fan of this environment. I'm a fan of seeing quality baseball, and because I wanted to see these two teams playing in a championship series. But I do think what LSU was able to accomplish last night and what you had Atkinson be able to accomplish yesterday, I think it really did help the arms for LSU. I think they got a puncher's chance. I'm going to lean with LSU tonight, and I think that's the matchup we're going to get tomorrow, where I still expect Wake Forest to be in the championship series, but I think they got to kind of they got to sweat it out a little bit for one more day.
You think we see Skeens tonight, or do you think they're? I mean, it's interesting because how this game starts is really going to decide a lot of what we see with him or without him, and maybe waiting until tomorrow. Do you think we see him tonight?
I think if we see Skeens tonight, I don't like that for LSU.
Yep,
so
same.
I'm going to stick. If I'm going to stick with LSU, I'm going to say we don't see Skeens.
Okay.
We get a good effort, and you might see some offense tonight.
Yeah, I think we're going to see him tonight, but I like Wake Forest, and then an odd couple of days here. But you know what? There was a time for a while here, Nick, where the series didn't start until a Saturday. Then there weren't the doubleheader days, and we would have a weekend without baseball. And so I know that there's the potential to not have anything tomorrow and Friday in terms of games, but we'll have Saturday and we'll have Sunday and then potentially Monday. So I even though that we're looking down the barrel at a couple days like that, man, I still like this format way better than the old format.
Absolutely. This is, and coaches do too, and that's the most important. Well, I guess the most important thing is ESPN does. But
yes.
But the coaches do that. I mean, everything, you still get rewarded for, winning your pool because you get some days off there. It's not 3 days, with the old format. If you were playing on that opening day and you won Saturday and you won would have been Monday, you get Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That was almost like too much.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You still get a day or two off, and I think the coaches sticking to the routine, they like that. guys are able to stay active, able to stay pretty fresh too. But also it condenses it down to, yeah, it's still a battle. If you lose that first game, you got to make your way out of the loser's bracket. But you just don't, look at that entire week and say, boy, we got to get through this, and then we got to try to force a game to be played on Saturday. And then if we win that game, then we only get – I mean, if you think about the grind that some of those teams had, especially if you would have lost on Saturday, how many games you would have had to play if you still have a chance to make the championship series. So I think all in all, from a fan standpoint, I think from a coverage standpoint, but more importantly for the players and coaches, I think this is the best thing the NCAA has done with this College World Series.
Money Chris down in Baton Rouge says, picking Wake, you are a monster, and I do not approve. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers!
Nick, I just realized the next time I will be on the air with you will most likely be a big red overreaction in the fall.
Oh, let's make it a good one.
Angry phone calls, people mad that they went into the shotgun formation on 4th and 1. Man, I can't wait. This was fun the last few days.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it again. And hey, that's going to be here before we know it.
It absolutely will be. All right, enjoy the baseball. John Bishop, Mike Farron, Gary Sharp on the field. It is Wake Forest. It is LSU. Wake wins, and they are playing in the championship series. LSU wins. We got one more tomorrow in a winner-take-all. For Nick Handley, for Josh Otson, Dan Campen, and back in the Zone Studios, I am Josh Peterson. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll be back on the air tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Goodbye.